Hello, heretics and heathens. This is Lilith. I'm here with Renee, and we are Veritas Voices. I hope you are all staying safe. This is normally the time in our rotation when we would do headlines from hell. I think the headlines have pretty clearly been taken over by one topic, and that's what we're going to discuss today.
Yeah.
Renee, how are you doing out there in Germany?
So far I am doing good at the moment. Obviously I have been on Twitter as well today, and I've seen the hashtags, I've seen the trends, I've seen the footage, and about what is currently going on, and about what the President of the United States, Donald Trump, is doing, and what is happening in the cities, and that obviously has me a little bit freaked out, and I can imagine that the same is also the case for you.
Yeah, I have people I care about in the States, in the southern United States, and I'm very concerned about them.
Yeah.
It's an appalling situation, but it isn't new. It isn't new, and because there have been years and years before we all had cameras everywhere, before we all had video cameras just in our pockets constantly. I used to listen to different kinds of comedians, and I went through a phase listening to a lot of Black comedians, and they would make comments constantly about the police just being willing to arrest or shoot them for anything whatsoever. And like it was a byword in the community. And that's the thing about comedians. You know, they may exaggerate a point here or there, but you don't get people to laugh unless there's truth to it.
Yeah.
And I realized that being Black in America was this entire experience with all of these nuances. I think it was Dave Chappelle said, being Black means you can never say the money's on the table as you leave a restaurant. Like, it's stuff like that where you wouldn't think of that specifically if you were an outsider like me.
Yeah.
And the murder of George Floyd, and it is murder, absolutely. It's been, it's been a tipping point, and a lot of people, the minute they're like, "Oh, can't you protest peacefully and not destroy property?" I'm like, "You mean like they've done for every other criminal murder of a Black man for the past 10 years by police for no freaking reason? You mean like that?" Yeah, apparently that didn't work. So now they're going to burn your buildings down, apparently, until you listen to them.
Yeah. Which is something that I understand as a perspective, but it's also something that I think may backfire in a lot of ways, because I think that people will try to stop this, and people will try to stop them, and in the end I think it will also lead to probably more unnecessary deaths. But I do see that people will go to extreme lengths right now, and that they have had enough, and that something needs to happen right now.
Well, the fact of the matter is that Black people, particularly Black men and boys, are taking their lives in their hands literally every time they leave the house. And at this point, if it's a risk to their life to go to the corner store and pick up a Coke, or to go and buy a hamburger, or to go to the bank, or to sit in their own living rooms unaccosted, not bothering anybody,
Yeah.
it, how much more of a risk to their life really is it to riot? At some point, when people have nothing left to lose, they have nothing left to lose. And there's a sense of, we're going to be murdered, we might as well take the rest take some of our enemies down with us is a kind of a desperate sensation, but I can understand it, and people shouldn't be driven to that point of desperation.
Yeah.
And of course, the demented Cheeto is doing nothing to help. He's trying to declare Antifa, which is literally anti-fascist, for those who literally, as a hate group. And, you know, completely ignoring groups of Proud Boys who are going around and harassing and hassling outside of protest lines. It's insane.
Yeah. I mean, when I read this morning what Trump is actually doing, that he's sort of hiding in his bunker, as people are saying, and that he's tweeting from there, and he's being a coward, and he doesn't stand up for anybody and doesn't stand up for anything. And to have that kind of person as a leader of your nation,
Well, he stands up for business interests. That's really the only thing he cares about. It's like they were tired of under the table corruption, so they just decided to have the worst person possible who would do everything out in public, and then they could pretend they didn't see. I don't get it. But there's a reason I'm not an American, and I'm very, very glad I'm not an American, because I do not regard that as a civilized country anymore. I can't. They don't have health care. They consider all of their rights and none of their responsibilities, which is, they're willing to abuse, and they're upset about property when people are being murdered, and they're willing to, I looked at the searches, and people were searching for George Floyd's criminal history, as if he had a criminal history at any point, that would somehow justify the police murdering him for, I believe the original problem that was called was that he was suspected of trying to pass a counterfeit bill. And this is the thing, especially in the States with their very old-fashioned money. Anyone might have a counterfeit bill and not even necessarily know it. It doesn't mean they're trying to pass it into circulation. Wahaha, I am so evil. They could have just, had a counterfeit bill. Oops.
Yeah. And what I've also wanted to say here is, let's say he did have a criminal history. I don't think he did, but let's say he did. That would in no way justify what the police officer did. That would in no way change anything, because when you're not currently doing something that is illegal, then you still have a right to your life. You still have a right to be left alone by the police. Currently, I sort of see, when I see the footage of the cities, when I see the footage of Washington, I also sort of see the writing on the wall. And I commented on a poll earlier that I saw on Twitter that I think America's really on the verge of going to war. I think there will be an internal war in America soon, and I think it will cost a lot of lives. And I'm very afraid for that. I mean, especially when you see, I don't care for property as much as I care for lives. In fact, in this situation, I don't care for property at all. But when I see that that in the streets things are burning, and when I see that people are putting things on fire, there's all sorts of craziness going on. That freaks me out to see that footage, and for me, it looks like it's leading in a direction that will cost millions of lives, especially also additionally with the coronavirus, which of course has taken a bit of a backseat right now, but it will also lead to more infections with the coronavirus, and
it does. Well, and the problem is that the right-wing nut jobs are all armed.
Yeah.
They've all been preparing for this, and then they're going to claim to be victims, even though they're the ones instigating, constantly instigating and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing.
I
Yeah.
think that I'm committing myself to a slippery slope here when I'm saying that I think there will be millions of people who are dying as a result of what is currently going on within America.
I don't know. I hope not, but I don't put much stock in hope.
Yeah.
I've
see
lived too long.
When I also see some politicians, they're calling for an airstrike sort of on the protesters. I don't know if who this particular politician was. I think it was a sort of senator, but he said something along the lines of, yeah, okay, you're destroying 101st Airborne. And the person who's calling for that is Tom Cotton. He's calling for an airstrike on his own citizens.
Oh, Jesus. You know what? A lot of people get very upset and defensive when people talk about white people. I don't.
Yeah.
I'm like, fucking white people. And I'm the whitest white person who ever whited. Let's be quite clear here. I'm pale. Yeah. But white people in the southern United States, this is something I've talked about with sexism too. There are a lot of really terrible, evil, evil bastards. But there are a lot of people who are complacent, who buy into a lot of bits of the underlying mentality that puts someone else below you. And they don't even necessarily realize it. And then they say, well, I'm not murdering anyone. How dare you include me? And I'll use the sexism example that I use because, frankly, it's a topic I have more personal experience and familiarity with. I use the example of in the movie Hitch, where the situation is set up so the titular hero can rescue a woman in a very modern sense who's being hit on by a man. And he comes over to buy her a drink, hit on her, and she says very politely, I understand it takes a lot to do this. I really appreciate it, but I'm not interested. And he doesn't take no for an answer. Oh, what's wrong with you? Blah, 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 blah. And generally he's an asshole. And then, of course, Will Smith comes in to save the day. Hi, honey, how was your meeting? And the thing is, the underlying narrative in that is very, very common because the idea is that a woman can't say no for herself unless there's something wrong with her. Why would she not want you? But if she's the property of another man in some sense, then the creep backs off. And I understand why, this is set up in a movie setting to sort of have a bit of a, an excuse for them to get together. And but that guy is not a rapist. He's not, he's not being abusive. He's being a bit of an ass. But there are so many of that lower level assumption. And even the rescue is the sense of you belong to someone. I'll pretend you belong to me so that he'll leave you alone. But the sense in which the woman is still not allowed to answer for herself.
Yeah.
And I think in retrospect, the right thing to do would have been, I think she made her position clear. Like she said, amplify the voice of the person because women are people and Black people are people. And I cannot imagine how difficult it must be to be a Black woman in the United States of all things. You girls, holy crap, you are warriors just for walking out every day and not just functioning at all. You are amazing. All of the props to you. But it's that same attitude underneath of, we own you, or we are a step above you in these little ways that you never think. And you realize it's that entire structure, that entire attitude underneath that needs to be rooted out, because that's the toxin. It's the whole root system. It's not just, the one cop who kills someone. That's bad, but it's a symptom. It's not the disease. This isn't a bad apple.
Sort of what needs to happen is that the entire attitude will have to change, the entire system will have to change. And George Floyd was the victim of the system, and what the cop did is obviously not the first time. It probably won't be the last time that this is happening, but this incident has called for a revolution in America, and we see that revolution happening right now, and history is being written right now. And I think this will go on for days, it will go on for weeks, and it will lead to something. It will lead, hopefully, for a better future for Black people, such that the system will get better for them, but it will also lead to, in my estimation at least, massive destruction.
Yeah. And you know what? Even some of the property owners, I remember reading an article about one small business owner who said, you know what? I can rebuild my restaurant. People can't bring back their dead. They need justice. Fine, whatever. It's not. And I mean, that's a big deal. That even people who are affected by this are saying, you know what? Yeah, that really freaking sucks. But I don't have it as bad as they do. And this is a bigger problem that needs to be dealt with. Too often, when a Black man is murdered by the cops for absolutely nothing, or perhaps having the audacity to, have tripped or just, upset a white woman or something, they'll try and dig up a criminal history. And that's the thing. I mean, pretty sure everyone has at least a speeding ticket in their past. You can find something if you dig hard enough, or just find someone who didn't like them. And I've seen that with George Floyd too. They're like, he had an extensive criminal history, blah, 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 as if that has any relevance at all. There's one thing though, I don't know whether to laugh or cry, because he was actually part of a Christian ministry. He had some darkness in his past and was going to, rebuild and everything. He was part of a ministry in housing projects. And as much as I really, really, truly find faith to be detrimental, I find many people of faith still to be very good people. And so you can tell the difference. Those who work in the affluence and want to heal the invisible problems and get lots of money for it, or people who actually get in the dirt and help people who are in actually difficult places. I have to say, with the racism that is, quite frankly, endemic in the American Christianity, it's quite something that even Christianity today is talking about George Floyd as, as a good man. And this is the power of Christian prejudice. He was part of a Christian ministry, so that makes him a good person. And you know what? Honestly, at this point, I'll take it. Because he was. If he associated it with Christianity, I am less a fan of that, but he spoke about breaking the cycle of violence and tried to build up the community. This was a man who was doing good and trying to encourage young, desperate and young men who are prone to violence because they're in poverty and you've got very few options, and frankly, life looks hopeless. So why wouldn't you? And then he's taken by that exact same violence. And I really understand why a lot of people are snapping.
Yeah. It's a perfectly understandable human reaction, and think the future is very uncertain as far as America goes, and like I said, I do think that this will lead to more violence. It may lead to war. I don't know where it's going, but yeah, we are facing troubling times.
Yeah, we are. And I have to say, as a Canadian, we had an incident too, very unfortunately timed. Well, I mean, this whole thing is just terrible. Not that there could be any positive timing for it.
Yeah.
And this has brought a lot of anger for the Black Lives Matter movement in Canada. And there is one. And our police are not sinless. There are lots of cases where people of color are treated with excessive force, are treated unjustly, and particularly Aboriginal people. Our hands are not clean, but it is nothing to this level. Like we are trying to get better. You look at the response across the country to the complaint of the Wet'suwet'en ancestral chiefs, and even if you had some concerns about their anger, what they were angry about, I appreciated that people in Canada pulled together to be like, hey, don't violate Aboriginal rights. And now, the public reaction was on that side of it, which is very much not the case in the United States. And there was, unfortunately, a terrible incident in Toronto recently. Now, this was, I will grant, I'm a little prejudiced towards my own country. I will try and be as just as I can. This woman, Regis Kurchinski Paquette, she was having some manner of mental health crisis. Her mother called the police. At one point, the police followed her, I don't know, into the bathroom or something. They kept her parents out of, or I don't know. I imagine everyone was very, very upset. And she, long story short, she fell from the balcony. They said she jumped from the balcony. Her mother's like, she would never do that. They must have pushed her. Now, this is obviously a far less clear situation. If someone's having a mental health crisis, they're not necessarily acting rationally in that moment. It's entirely possible that she thought the cop was reaching for her to do her harm and flailed backwards or something. I have no idea. Don't know. I want there to be an independent inquiry. In Canada, across most of the country, we have the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Toronto is one of the few cities that has a local city police, and I have always been more suspicious of local city police than of the RCMP collectively. It's important, and I want. This is not a clear-cut case in the same way as it is with George Floyd, where it's just a murder, plain and simple, for no reason other than presumably an ego trip on the part of a white cop. But it is important that every situation be treated with concern and severity and be subject to independent inquiry from people who do not have a dog in the fight. I mean, it's been disgusting. Did you read the coroner report on, or see the articles about the coroner report in the case of George Floyd?
No, I didn't, but maybe you can give me a bit of a summary or.
Oh, Lord. Okay. In the case of George Floyd, his body was obviously sent in for autopsy.
Yeah.
And it's just, I'm sorry, I am trying not to scream because The official coroner's report said that Mr. Floyd had underlying health conditions, including coronary artery disease and hypertensive artery, that may not support murder charges, and that no physical findings support a diagnosis of traumatic asphyxia or strangulation.
Wow.
I'm like, I'm sorry, precisely what manner of pre-existing condition would make it so you wouldn't die if someone kneeled on your neck for 9 minutes? Being Superman?
There's
Because
no
George
such.
Floyd didn't have that. So, yeah. I mean, if
There
he's
are,
kneeling on the back of his neck, so there's not an obvious, like, garrote wire mark or something like that. But my God.
it's like they're already making up excuses so that this won't be what it clearly is, which is murder. That the police officer won't get charged with murder. That's sort of what I'm getting
Yeah,
from.
no, and well, and it means, quite frankly, that you need to start looking back into cases, because when the medical examiner is willing to be this dishonest to protect the cop, and let's face it, we all know that's what's happening.
Yeah.
It's just, you have to wonder, what else has he covered up? Because this is a case where literally it's on video. It's on multiple videos from multiple angles. There were 3 cops kneeling on him, not just the one. The one was kneeling on his throat.
Yeah.
But let's not pretend that, that anything other than this happened. And the idea that they would even attempt this kind of thing, I can't. And there are even some places that are taking this seriously, as much as I hate to say it. It was the Hennepin County medical examiner, and and this whole thing is because someone thought he paid with a counterfeit $20 bill.
Yeah. It's, like you said earlier, it's a systemic issue. The death of George Floyd was a symptom. It wasn't. It is a symptom of a much larger issue in America, and it's not just the police. It's also about the doctors. It's like part of the culture, and the
Mm,
culture is sick in America.
it is. It absolutely is. And that's a part of the culture too. The types of police, and there are far, far, far too many of them, who are willing to just toe the line, protect their own at all costs, no matter what they do.
Yeah. They're being complicit.
They're absolutely complicit, and in some cases, far more than complicit. I'm sorry. This is so, so terrible. And just, it's just a symptom. Because 3 years ago, when, again, more young black men were being murdered by the cops, I reached a point where I just said, nothing has changed. Like, nothing has changed since Billie Holiday sang the song Strange Fruit. And if you don't know that song, you need to look it up.
I have.
She was a jazz singer, and she sang pretty songs for white folks about the moonlight and love. And one night, she found the courage to sing the song Strange Fruit. And it was about the habitual, common nearly daily lynching and burning of Black people in the South, sometimes for some trumped up crime, sometimes just to keep the niggas from getting uppity. Because, of course, keeping people afraid for their lives is a really good method of control.
Yeah.
And from that day on, it was always the last song she sang. And I used the footage from, I would have used George Floyd if I'd made it now, but it's the first video on my channel, and it was for the longest time the only video. Just looking back through years of people getting shot, Remington being beaten, of the, you know, the protests, the civil rights protests, and back to the days of those murders being a normal day-to-day thing. And I set it to that song because it was the right thing to do.
Yeah. We will see what happens in the future, and all we can do is try to make the world better, and all we can do is hope. And also the people in America doing something, some sort of a revolution, so that it will change, and that this will be one of the last cases that something like this had ever happened. But I fear that this
That would be nice.
will be the last time.
I mean, that would be lovely. I very much doubt it will occur. And I'm very sorry for the people who are going through this. And I will do what I can. Unfortunately, where I am and when it is, there's very, very little I can do besides speak out, but I will do that.
Yeah. That's what we have to do.
It's what we all should be doing. And one person actually, it was quite interesting. Listening to someone, I was sort of asking, you know, what can white people do who want to help, who are genuinely appalled at this and really, really not okay and want to, you know, be part of the solution and not the problem. And someone said, we call ourselves shields because we stand between the cops and Black protesters, because for one, they're more hesitant to murder us, yay, and for another, it's putting yourself in a position to be treated the same way and to use that to protect those who have no other protection.
Yeah.
And I support that. It takes a lot of courage to do, and it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. I think on that note, may we be able to end the episode for now? Because
I think,
that's also touching me, and it's also exhausting, and it
you
gives
know,
us
I think, yeah,
fun.
it's been a very difficult thing. And I think we all need to be kind to each other, find a way to support each other. This is not an easy time.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say to our listeners, please be careful. Be kind to yourselves. Be kind to each other. And reason bless.